Well, welcome to another discussion. So here with me, I've got today is I should have asked this before the recording. Actually, do you go by Ash or Ashley?
Either's fine. Typically people call me Ashley. If they know me well, they call me Ash, but I like either.
Okay, cool. I'll go with Ashley. So we've got Ashley here, and today we're going to speak about. So how this came around was that Unnatural Vegan made a video recently about when she went to a vegan market with her family, and she saw some activists there, or she saw that there was a stall there from the organization Stop Having Kids, which is a antinatalist organization. They go out, do street outreach, and she really didn't agree with this, and she basically shared her opinions about that in the video. And I thought that would, it's like an interesting topic of should antinatalists be in vegan spaces, or should we kind of leave it just to be vegan stuff? Um, and I got Ashley on because, well, maybe you can just sort of go into it in your intro. So, like, say a bit about who you are if you can, and maybe how you got involved with Stop Having Kids.
For sure. So I've been vegan. I just passed my 11-year anniversary, sparked by watching the documentary Earthlings, and went vegan overnight. Came to many realizations that I was totally heartbroken by. So I just made the swap. And yeah, I've been very passionate about protesting and advocating for animals for probably the last 8 or so years. And I knew for a long time that I didn't want kids, but I didn't know until a couple of years ago that antinatalist was actually a term and that there were many others like me that shared these
Mm,
beliefs. And I was talking with a good friend of mine, the founder of Stop Having Kids, Dietz, and he had basically gotten a face mask made early in COVID, and it just was made from Etsy. It said "Stop Having Kids." He started wearing it, and people were reacting really positively to it. And he was getting a lot of compliments. So he started thinking, wow, maybe there's something to this. So he was kind of talking like maybe, we could start up like some activism around antinatalism. And I was like, yes, I'm totally in. It's such an important message. But admittedly, I was kind of nervous. I mean, despite having
mm,
done various forms of activism, I felt like this could be potentially upsetting to people. And I was really worried about negative reactions, but I was blown away by how well received it was. So basically, early 2021, I went out to Portland to spend a couple weeks with him. And for 14 of the 16 days I was there, we went out to the streets with signs and Stop Having Kids banner and a giveaway box with, essential items, snacks, stuff like that. And we had so many great conversations with people. And I saw that there's something really to this. A lot of people understand the message. And I think with the pandemic and everything, like it's woken up people a little more to some of the harsh realities of existence. And people are ready for this message. And beyond that, what I didn't expect was all the people who approached us saying that they were so happy to see people speaking out about this because they felt very isolated in their beliefs and in not wanting kids and like wondered, is there something wrong with me for not wanting kids? And so that was really cool too. And then just people sharing their personal stories of trauma and, reasons why they don't want to perpetuate this cycle of procreation. And yeah, it's been really amazing. I started a group here in Minneapolis just over a year ago. And unfortunately, we have the really cold winters and people kind of
mm.
tuck away. So there aren't a lot of opportunities for street outreach in the cold months, but we're branching out and doing other things. We're going to have a volunteer day at a farm sanctuary soon. We just went and pulled buckthorn, an invasive species, in a local park, which helps, the environment and wildlife. And yeah, we have a couple other ideas in the works for things to do. So I'm looking forward to that.
Mm. Yeah, no, I like that Stop Having Kids has sort of embraced like not they don't just do outreach to try and spread a message. They also do like you said, work days or however you want to call it, like pulling buckthorn or going to a sanctuary and stuff. Because I think like if you just do like it's good to talk about antinatalism with people and sort of question their like assumptions and pre-existing beliefs around that, but sometimes, you can get the sort of criticism launched at you of like, well, you kind of hate people or something like that, or you're a misanthrope, or which may be true. You may be a misanthrope, like that is fine. Like I'm a misanthrope. Like I'm not the biggest fan of humanity, but whatever, we move. Um, but I think one thing that is really good about Stop Having Kids is that they go out and do these like work days, like the Buckthorn and the Sanctuary, because it goes to show, well, yeah, we're spreading this antinatalist message, but we do care about like people and animals that exist now, and like to show that we're going out and doing these things, which I think kind of maybe like you know what's the word, like dumb, like is an easy way to respond to that sort of criticism, basically, because it's not just about like hating humanity and stuff like that. We actually want to prevent harm and help already existing like individuals as well. um Before we go into like the main topic, I wanted to quickly backtrack, because you said that like for a while you didn't want to have kids, until like before you found out about antinatalism. But what, were you antinatalist before that, or you just generally didn't want kids, and then you found out about antinatalism and it sort of like solidified it, or how did that work?
I think for several years I was kind of bewildered that people were having kids considering everything going on, and
Mm,
knowing that like their kid could really have a lot of struggle ahead of them. So I don't know that I was like hardcore against procreation, but I just kind of was like, whoa, I can't believe people are having kids. I don't know that I like assigned a negative value or anything to it. But yeah, once I learned of antinatalism, I was like, oh, this makes so much sense. Like I'm definitely on board with this.
mm. Yeah, see, I was like very different to you, I think. Like definitely had the sort of like natalist glaze, sort of like I just saw every like because I basically became vegan and antinatalist like very close together.
Oh,
So like and becoming vegan was the thing that really made me see the world in like a negative way, because of what people are doing to animals. And whereas before that, I really was not that like critical about what was going on. I was kind of just like a normie, or however you want to put it. So I wanted 3 kids. I was looking forward to having kids. And then when I came across antinatalism, it was like bam, hit over the head with this thing. And I just had a complete 180. Um so yeah, I came at it from like a quite a different like angle from you. But like we still both like like found antinatalism. So before we go into the main topic, which I want to do now, but I just want to say first, like for anyone that's watching, like um, I got you on just as you. Like obviously you've been involved with like Stop Having Kids, but I don't want you to feel like, or anyone watching to feel like you're a spokesperson or anything like that.
yeah,
Because I want you to share like your opinions. I don't want you to feel constrained by like, oh, am I going to say this and Stop Having Kids are going to like it or whatever.
absolutely.
Um, yeah, so I wanted to say that. So the way this came around about antinatalists being in vegan spaces was, like I mentioned, Unnatural Vegan. She went with her family to a market, and Stop Having Kids had a stall there, and she really didn't like that. She thought it was like unwelcoming to families and for children. Um, you you've spoken to, so I think you said that you haven't actually been to any of those demos, right, at vegan markets, but you've spoken to people. What did you sort of hear from them about like their experience doing that?
Well, one thing I just want to add in is that Unnatural Vegan actually didn't even attend the event because she has a new
Oh.
baby. And she said that even if that wasn't the case, that she probably wouldn't have even gone to the event. So I'm also just kind of like, then why are you I don't know, that's beside the point. But,
Mm,
yeah, I have not personally been to any of these events, but I've heard, kind of the recap after, and, the most controversy I think that's been stirred up has been online prior to these events. So there was one
mm,
instance, in Canada, there's no longer a group there, the organizer has moved, but she was posted up she was initially going she got approved to be at, I think it was like a vegan fest or something of the sort, and then there was a lot of pushback, so they basically said, like, "I'm sorry, we can't have you here." So she's like, okay, I'm going to go outside and hold my signs and just do a little demonstration. And she said people were like, from my understanding, pretty hateful and not super welcoming of the message. And then in Portland, they did, I don't know if it was the vegan night market, but something, a vegan event. And they said it was overwhelmingly positive. There was, at the first event, there was like a dirty look from somebody, which who knows what that means. And then at the
Mm,
second event, I guess a woman had come up with some of her friends and she was trying to say that it was anti feminist. But then she had conversation with the Stop Having Kids activists and came to understand that she was in the wrong. Her assumption was wrong. And even her friends, I guess, were kind of helping her to understand the Stop Having Kids stance, which is really cool. And they had a
mm,
great conversation. And, she walked away with a Stop Having Kids sticker and, seemed to have a more thorough understanding of what this message actually is. And then in Asheville, North Carolina, they had a event at a vegan fest. And again, online, there was a lot of pushback prior to the event, people trying to say they shouldn't be there. But then a lot of like antinatalists came in and gave their input and support for having Stop Having Kids there. And it went really well. Sounds like it was very positively received, and the people running the events said they'd love to have Stop Having Kids back at future events. So, again, as with what I've seen a lot doing this activism is in person for the most part, it's very positive. You have those run-ins with people who, are they feel personally attacked or they have a misunderstanding about the message and they're running off of assumptions, or people driving by who want to yell things out so you don't even get an opportunity to have a conversation. For the most
mm.
part, the negativity comes online. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, not as much on Facebook really. Or people like they trying to think of there's been like some religious groups who've shared Stop Having Kids content, and then all of a sudden we get a wave of like hate emails and hate messages and stuff like that. But that's just online. So I think that a lot of
Yeah, I mean,
people maybe want to get involved, but they're nervous about pushback. And I just want to assure people, and I can't, speak for everywhere. I've done it in many cities, but
mm.
it's mostly positive.
Yeah, actually, that's interesting. You were saying you've done it in many cities. This question isn't like specifically vegan related, but have you noticed the like differences in reactions between cities? I'm assuming have you generally done it in cities rather than rural places, or have you done both?
Correct. Mostly in cities. Yeah, personally, the most pushback that I witnessed in person was in a more wealthy white city in Minnesota, a wealthy suburb. And it was, there was a couple of moms who were like, your message isn't for us here. And I was like, what does that mean? And yeah, that was kind of the nastiest that it got, and, people tried to claim that we
Yeah,
were racist also, which I thought was really bizarre considering where we were at that time.
yeah.
But, yeah, haven't done this in any rural areas, but
Do
maybe
do you
someday.
do you have any like guess as to why they were maybe more hostile there? Do you think that it was just kind of like random off chance, or do you think it was because they were more wealthy and maybe they're not as used to people sort of pushing, like coming into there and pushing back on them?
I
Or
think that's definitely part of it. They're not used to, like, seeing demonstrations and things like that, and also especially with this one conversation I had with a man in particular, he was trying to act as if I had a very negative worldview. And he, in
mm,
my opinion, had a very like glossy eyed view of the world. And it's
yeah,
maybe due to his privilege. He's a middle aged white man living in a primarily white, wealthy city. So maybe and I can't speak for, any past struggles that he may have had or currently has, but like he just seemed to have a really tough time understanding that like life isn't amazing for everybody and life isn't always what you make it.
yeah, and I mean like even someone in his situation, like you said, you don't know what traumas he's been through, but like presumably he's been through some. Like everyone has been, like, even the richest of the rich, they have shit days, and there can be things that happen to them that being rich doesn't protect you from, and stuff like that. Like yeah, I think maybe he's just someone with a particularly closed mind, and the maybe lifestyle or position he's in kind of doesn't challenge the fact that he has a closed mind. Maybe it just kind of like supports it. Whereas if someone else was closed minded, but like they'd had a shit life, their shit life is constantly going to be opening up that like closed mind to get them to like change their perspective. Um, so have you, like, not just markets, but have you done any sort of antinatalist outreach? Maybe not just with Stop Having Kids, but any at all in specifically vegan spaces?
I haven't personally. I considered trying to get a table at our Veg Fest, but I was already
Mm,
volunteering with another group, so I was just like, "Ah, it's not gonna fit into the day." I might try in the future, but, no, I haven't, and I think that there should be more of that because so many antinatalists that I know and have met are vegan, and many people,
mm,
like you said, you kinda came to it around the same time, and if you're seeing the amount of suffering and wanting to reduce that, it's just kind of the logical step is to be vegan and antinatalist or vegan antinatalist.
Yes, no, no, I agree. It's like not even like the way I see it is that it's not even the next logical step because that sort of assumes that like veganism comes first and then antinatalism. I feel like they're just sort of like twinned or whatever. They sort of just have these strong links between them. Um So I'm assuming you've spoken to vegans though, at least one on one, like friends you may have or things about that. Have you noticed any different? And I'll share my like experience with this as well. But have you noticed any difference between vegans and just the general population when speaking about antinatalism?
It's interesting because until recently, for the most part, I was noticing that vegans were understanding it pretty quickly. It didn't take much to kind of get them to understand, like, oh, reducing suffering, caring about already existing life. Many vegans are, well, vegans should be of the mindset that like we don't need to be breeding animals and more animals into existence when we already cannot care for those who are here. So,
Mm,
in my mind, it's, like, kind of logical to extend that to humans as well, like, we are definitely not caring for all the human life that's already here, so why are we bringing more into existence? But, I actually the last week or so, I've kind of been having a back and forth with a vegan who definitely wants kids someday, and it's just interesting because this individual is an activist himself, and he's had many of these kind of similar conversations with non-vegans, and he's so resistant to the antinatalist message, and it's kind of been bumming me out because 'cause I'm like, "Am I not doing a good enough job, explaining antinatalism? Like, why isn't it clicking?" Because, he's a vegan activist, he understands a lot of these things, and it's interesting to kind of see the parallels. When you do a lot of vegan activism, you get a lot of these same common questions, where do
mm.
you get your protein and, blah, blah, blah. And I noticed that with antinatalism as well. People bring up these same things like, I want to pass on my genes or continue my legacy and I'm just like,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. It's been a rough one for me. So for the most part, I would say vegans seem to be far more understanding and connect with the message easier than your average person, I guess.
No, I would agree. Like, I would say probably most of the people I've spoken to about antinatalism have been vegan because, and maybe this is bad on my part, but I feel like I live in a bit of a bubble now, and to some extent that is intentional because I'm just so done with putting up with Kana's bullshit. Like I just can't be bothered with that much anymore.
Yep.
But like obviously I still have friends and stuff from when I was not vegan, so I'm not gonna. It's not like I'm gonna push them away or anything. So I still interact with non-vegans like on a regular occasion, but most of the people that I've spoken to about antinatalism have been vegan. And for anything that I have noticed, I would also say like vegans are more open-minded about it. Like like you have, I've spoken to vegans who have been. I wouldn't say I've spoken to any vegans who are completely closed-minded on it. I would just say that like anyone with procreation, it's such this sort of inner thing that people have, whether it comes from biology or culture. Like so many people like including my previous self, like just almost base their lives around being able to create someone else. It's just such this important thing. And I think it's kind of it I think it taps at something deeper than veganism does, because with veganism, it's about something that you're sort of it's just with veganism, it's just not that hard to give up. It's not like people don't revolve their lives around, or at least if they do, I see them as pretty sad. But like people don't revolve their rounds as much as they want to say online. They don't revolve their um, lives around bacon or whatever. So it's like when you challenge it, sure they're going to come up with these dumb excuses or whatever, but it's not like you're questioning some sort of fundamental thing of their being. Whereas like when you're talking to someone about antinatalism, whether they're vegan or not, and I think this is why you get some vegans, even though vegans are more generally open minded about ethics, you still get these people who are very sort of hard to talk to about antinatalism, because you're getting at something which they have been like hardwired by evolution for billions of years to want to do. Like literally, if you look at it from an evolutionary point of view, we are all here just to reproduce. That is literally our only evolutionary purpose. So of course it's going to be hard to talk to people about. So I don't think you should be disheartened about that guy. Like, you're literally fighting against billions of years of like natural selection. Um, so I agree. I think vegans are more open minded, but you're still going to get those people because of the whole evolution thing that they're hard to talk to about it. Um, so yeah, we've sort of got to the point where we think vegans are more open-minded to antinatalism, which is good and maybe suggests that we should be talking to vegans more because they're sort of like the low-hanging fruit. And I don't think there's any controversy in saying that we should be talking to vegans one-on-one about it. But like where I think people get a bit touchy is if we should be going into vegan spaces like a market, um or what other vegan spaces are there, I don't know, like a vegan Facebook group or something like that, and bringing up antinatalism. What do you think about that generally? Do you think that antinatalists should like stay in their lane, and it's not we're sort of taking the spotlight away from animals if we go into vegan spaces, or do you think it's completely fine?
I personally think it's completely fine. I can understand why other people would take some issue with it, but I think it's completely fine. Especially like I worked for an animal rights nonprofit for 4 years, and we would try to get into any event that we could. If there was some way that our message aligned, whether we take like the environmental route or the health route, or, we want to get in there because there are people who have some level of interest in some of the information that we have to offer. So it's a way to meet people that you wouldn't otherwise meet. And on the flip side, too, I think that, like that night market in Portland, for example, bringing in Stop Having Kids, like Stop Having Kids has kind of built up a bit of a reputation. And so people went to the market specifically to see Stop Having Kids and get some merch.
Oh,
So they may
really?
not have
Oh.
otherwise gone to this vegan event, but they're
Mm,
there. I'm assuming they're probably like, oh, I'm gonna get some food or look around a little bit, and maybe these people had an opportunity to learn something that they otherwise wouldn't have and be further exposed to like the vegan message as well. So I don't know. I think it makes a lot of sense for Stop Having Kids to be in an event like that, especially considering the founder is a longtime vegan. Most of the organizers are vegan. All of the food giveaways are vegan. Everything in our giveaway box is vegan friendly.
mm.
So yeah, I think that it makes a lot of sense to be at events like that because it's like, where else are you going to be able to go? Like the message isn't going to align with every event in every single way, but we have to, if we're welcoming and want to reach as many people as possible, I think that's a good way to do it.
Mm. So I've got two questions which I think could be well okay, the second one just popped into my head. The other one came into my head before. So what would you say to the people who like Unnatural Vegan? She said in her video that it could make people feel uncomfortable, specifically like families or parents. Like I don't when people say it would make kids feel uncomfortable, I don't necessarily buy it because I don't think kids would really see a Stop Having Kids stall and really pay attention. Like, sure, kids are smart, but I don't think something like that would really play on their mind. It's not like you're literally shoving like slaughterhouse footage in their face. Do you get what I mean? Which is what
Yeah.
sometimes vegans do, which I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but I'm just saying it on the level of extremeness, having a stop having kids stool and shoving slaughterhouse footage in a kid's face, I think that the stool is less extreme. So what would you say to people who say this about that, it makes people feel unwelcome at a vegan event?
I think that that's people like their defensiveness is taking over. And I think it's a really good opportunity for parents to one, learn on their own, and two, have, open up a conversation with their kids. And doing outreach, we've had people come over with their kids and say, can you tell me a little bit more about this? And it's interesting because I find like the kids usually aren't like upset or super offended. They kind of go with their parents' reaction of it. And it's been really cool to have parents come over, they have a conversation, and then they in turn, kind of explain our message to their kids in a way that they know their child would understand it. And
Mm.
I love seeing that. Like, I wish that my parents would have done stuff like that and introduced me to different ideas that I might not have otherwise come across, until many years later. So, I don't think it's not saying, I felt like Unnatural Vegan was kind of saying that, like, how am I trying to word this? Her take was that it's offensive to kids and you don't want kids around. It's like, no, this isn't about these already existing. We're saying don't create more humans. It's not even
Mm.
essentially just about kids. Like, these kids become adults. They are humans. They are a member of what I would deem the most destructive and invasive species. So, yeah, I think that a lot of it's just dependent on the parent, and it's an opportunity for them to learn and explain to their kid instead of just getting upset and, running off of assumptions as people tend to do.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, I can get maybe why parents may see that and get defensive and either not go to the event or see it at the event and just sort of like walk away and try to ignore it. I can understand where they're coming from, but it seems to me, and again, I'm saying this as someone who, like, I'm not a parent. I haven't had to like navigate this whole thing with kids of like when is the appropriate time to give them a life lesson or when isn't, or all of this sort of stuff. But it seems to me like the most sort of mature, generally speaking, the most mature approach to, if you go to a market and stop having kids stall is there. And um if you find it uncomfortable, then that's like you're a fully grown adult. You just need to like address your inner feelings, like you're a competent human being. um but if you're talking about the kid, um I would say if the kid has seen the stall and is distressed by it, which I just can't. I can't imagine a kid doing that because I don't think kids see stools like that would be like that and feel they would be inquisitive. It seems like the natural reaction a kid would have is to be inquisitive. They wouldn't be like shaken to their very core about it. So it seems like the most responsible or mature way of going about it with your kid is to recognize the fact that your kid's seen it and have a conversation with them about it. Ask them, like, what do you think about that? If they don't have an opinion, talk to them about it. Say, this is what they're saying. This is why they're saying it. Or maybe get one of the people at the store to explain it to them. Um, and like, don't treat your kid like they're like a vegetable. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you say, kids are going to grow up to be adults. And I think the more that we expose our kids to ideas that they may feel uncomfortable or that are unusual. One, it's going to harden them for the vicissitudes of life, that they've imposed upon them. Um, yeah, it's just going to make them more mature, competent people, is the way I see it. But, people know their kids better. If their kid is like really emotionally sensitive, then maybe it is just best to shimmy them on or whatever. But um,
I
yeah,
do
sorry,
I
you
had
go.
one run-in with a mother, because apparently my mask, Stop Having Kids mask, upset her child, and,
Mm,
I was at a vegan restaurant, and it was Mother's Day, and people were like, "Maybe you shouldn't wear that mask on Mother's," and I'm just like, I wear it all the like, this was, 2021 early, people still kinda had mask mandates in place or suggestions or
yeah.
whatever, and I'm like, "Okay, it's a good way to, like, get the message out there," and so I'm in this line, and I could see this family kind of staring at me. It was like maybe a 9 or 10-year-old daughter, her mom, and then the grandma, I'm assuming. And I felt as if they were looking over at me and kind of whispering, and I couldn't be sure. So I wasn't going to just approach them and be
Mm,
like, hey, like, open up a conversation. And I'm like, they can approach me if they want. I usually try to have like stop having kids cards on me if people want to learn more, but maybe don't have time.
mm.
And they didn't say anything to me. And then later that day, I had a couple friends send me screenshots from a Facebook post. And it was the woman from the restaurant. And she had posted a photo of me. And she said, she called me a yoga pants wearing edgelord, which I found hilarious.
You
One of my
should put that
favorite
in your bio.
things. I've had some pretty good names thrust at me through activism. It's pretty comical. But and she had this like passionate caption saying, "My kid can read, dumbass," and claiming that I hurt her child's feelings, and her daughter told her to like out me online. And thankfully, like my friends who were mutuals with her, even some who had kids shared, my
Mm,
stance and why, I feel this way, and encouraged them to like, or that woman to reach out to me. And I'd even sent that woman a Facebook message, just kind of like further explaining the message and linking her to the website and stuff. I never heard back, but it was just fascinating. So I was like, was your child really that worked up about it? Or were you upset and then your child kind of took that on? Like you guys
mm.
could have come up and
Or she may just yeah, or she may just be using her child as like a sort of meat shield or whatever you want to call it. Sort of
yeah,
like using her as a tool to put her message forward. Who is this?
this is Tutors. Her name was Petunia, but
Tutors.
it's kind of evolved into Tutors. She's making
um,
me crunch on some food here.
no, it's all good. It's all good. Um, so do you have any so like we've kind of talked about like okay, should antinatalists be in vegan spaces? And I think if I'm gonna be like the most sensible, like I think my like answer is it it depends. Like I think there are maybe some vegan spaces where I think it's completely fine for like some antinatalist message to be chucked in there, and maybe there are some where it's not as appropriate. So I'll give you an example. There's a group in London. um I hope I'm getting this right. So they're called We Stand for the Animals, and they do mainly street outreach. But once a year, I'm pretty sure it's once a year, they have a memorial day for all the animals that have been killed that year, right? Now, what they kind of do is they stand there with pictures of different animals that are exploited in different industries, and someone gives a speech. And I think maybe that is an example of a sort of vegan event demonstration where it probably wouldn't be as appropriate or appropriate to introduce an antinatalist message, because even though I think like the two messages are interlinked, I think that it's one of those ones where there's a lot of emotional sensitivity around it, and it's literally just supposed to be about the animals, and it's specifically remembering the ones who have died. And obviously it's like, don't create more people who are going to murder animals, but um it, I think it would just be taken wrong, and it would detract from the event, if you get what I mean. So I think it does somewhat depend. Maybe another argument would be at like an animal rights march as well, but even then people do have different signs at an animal rights march, so you could kind of get away with having a bit of an antinatalist message. So I guess it depends a bit, but I would say generally I think it's fine to have an antinatalist message. But so we've spoken about that. We kind of established that. Do you, do you think that we should approach vegans in a different way than non-vegans to speaking about antinatalism? Do you have any thoughts on how antinatalists should interact with vegans about antinatalism?
I don't know about how we should interact. I think just reading the individual person is key. But I have found myself when speaking to vegans about antinatalism, I will kind of draw the parallel. Like, I'll make the comparison. Like, when we talk to animal eaters, we come up against these common arguments, and there's that in this situation as well. And so I think it encourages them, knowing that, to be a little more ready to receive certain information and have a more peaceful, like, back and forth, because they've been there when doing outreach
Mm,
to non-vegans. So um, yeah, I don't know. I think it's more so about reading the individual and kind of seeing, like,
mm,
where their interests lie, and yeah, just answering their questions, I guess.
mm. No, I agree. I think like when you're having a conversation with someone, the bulk of like what should determine how you talk to them is like them as an individual person. One thing that I do think could help antinatalists when speaking to vegans specifically, which I don't think would apply to non-vegans, is um, what you said basically is constantly trying to chuck into the conversation the fact that there are so many parallels between how do I word this? So you know how people kind of connect with each other more if they share a struggle. I know it's kind of like a wanky word or like a cringy word, but they sort of share somewhat of a struggle. So with vegans, you know, people get. Have you heard of the term Vistopia?
Mhm.
Yeah. So for anyone that doesn't know, Vistopia is, but it's a term that basically means like the feeling and the anguish someone can get from being vegan in a non-vegan world. And often, you know, vegans, like you said, will have the same old arguments like protein, desert island, all of this sort of stuff. And I think one thing that antinatalists can do with vegans is constantly remind them that antinatalists get the exact same thing. So they you know, it's a way to relate to them and say like vegans, like I know you get all this shit from carnists because like I get it too. Like I get how you, but like I get the same thing with antinatalism. And I think if you say stuff like that to them, and I'll give an example in a minute, but if you say stuff like that to them, they can realize like, oh yeah, like I'm kind of on the fringe of society and I'm getting like this shit from wider society, so I can kind of relate to that other person who has like a different view, but I can relate to them on that level, and maybe it'll be make them a bit more sympathetic. And the
Mhm.
example I give is I got a video coming out on on Wednesday, but I mean when this goes out, it'll already be out, and it's me talking to a guy, Johnny, and he's vegan. He's not antinatalist, and I was trying to convince him of antinatalism, right? And he brought up, you know, you want, you know, you're against creating people because you want to prevent the harm that would happen to them. But like, what if in their entire life they just stub their toe, right? And as he was saying that, which I don't hold it against him, like these are the things that people go to. It's like the common stuff.
Sure.
But as he was saying that, I literally said, "What if they stub their toe?" And we said "stub their toe" at the literal same time. And he started to laugh, and he was like, "Oh, how did you know I was going to say that?" And I said, "Yeah, it's because you know how people say to vegans, 'What if you're on a desert island?' This is the desert island for antinatalists. Like they say, 'What if they stub their toe?'" And he started to laugh. And it's stuff like that that you can use examples like that with vegans to make them understand where you're coming from more and the experience that you kind of have as an antinatalist, and it kind of softens them up a bit. Other than that, I don't know if there's any difference speaking to a vegan than anyone else. Like you just have to take it on a case by case basis. But I've had some fun like pointing out the consistence, like the similarities on how you like get shit from people, and like usually the vegans will laugh about it and stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't know if you've run up against this too, but for me, the most common thing that I find other vegans saying is that vegans should be the ones to have kids.
oh,
And
literally all the time.
and it just bums me out. It's like, "Okay, let's talk through this and think about this." It's like, there is 0 guarantee that your kid is going to be vegan. Most
Mm,
vegans can't even get our own parents to go vegan. I don't really know. I
mm.
know very few people who are vegan
Oh, that's a
who
really
have
good
vegan
point.
parents. And,
Oh,
I don't think I know anybody, I could be wrong, but I don't think I know of anybody who is vegan because their parents were.
mm,
So it's just kind of this delusion, and it's like, yeah, you can hope that your kid's gonna be vegan, but who knows? So many things can happen, and if that could be one more person harming animals, the very thing that you are so against, yet you're willing to take that risk.
mm.
And
Yeah,
actually,
and I
like, Dietz got banned from a sanctuary for basically
Oh,
saying
from a
how
sanctuary.
yeah, from, like, having a back
Oh,
and forth with the founder saying, that, having kids isn't exactly vegan because you could be bringing an animal harmer into existence, and she did
I
not
thought
like
you were. Yeah,
that.
I thought you were going to say that Deets got banned from a Facebook group, but banned from a sanctuary. That is next
That we
level.
had rescued chickens at, which is even more devastating.
Wow. Yeah, that seems like an overreaction from the person who runs the sanctuary, but yeah, I mean, yeah, that seems like an overreaction. I've never heard of that, but what was I going to say? What were we just speaking about? You were speaking about
Vegans
remind
thinking
me
that
what were
their
you
kids
just
are
speaking.
gonna be vegan.
Oh, yes. Yeah, 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 yeah. So it's interesting you mentioned because I get a lot of vegans say to me, in fact, this is probably one of the main things that I run up against with vegans is they say that um, often they will actually say, like, I have no bone to pick with the actual philosophy of antinatalism. Like they kind of get it. Maybe they're not fully like subscribed up to it, but they kind of get it. But the reason that they're hesitant to follow along with it or help promote it or fully take it on board is because they think it'll hinder veganism and the sort of path to animal liberation, right? And one of the reasons they think that is because they think, well, we need more vegans, which I agree with, but they think that procreation it should play a key part in that. Whereas I think that education is going to be the big education or legal change because or I think there will be three big things: education, like individual people learning and becoming vegan; legal change, providing more protections to animals; and like technological innovation, stuff like lab grown meat, and
Mm.
it will just make animal use redundant in many ways. Um, so I think procreation it may end up playing a small part in like creating more vegans, but is it worth the cost of creating those people, putting them through all the suffering they're going to go through and all the deaths they're going to have, and also running all of those risks that they may end up not being vegan as well? So it does seem to me like vegans using procreation as a form of activism seems severely misguided to me. And I usually bring up the case. I don't know if you know about this. Do you know of Alex Hershaft?
Yeah,
Yeah, so his daughter, I don't know if you know, but his daughter is actually like a carnivore dieter. Like she promotes eating like loads of meat, if not all meat. I can't remember if she promotes just eating meat, like someone like Michaela Peterson, but she's on social media, she has a following, and she promotes people like basically abusing animals.
I
And
had no
and
idea.
Alex Hershaft is one of the like a leading animal rights activist. So if his kid, could be not vegan, then like I think that just sure it's just one example, but it's an example that goes to show that even someone who so consistently puts out the message of veganism, um like their gamble didn't pay off. So why would anyone else's pay off 100%?
There's
um
sanctuary owners who have kids that aren't vegan, you know?
yeah, it's mad. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. I think the reason that people are willing to take that risk is because they are kind of ignoring the risk because they want to satisfy this deep biological whatever desire to have a kid. And I think they kind of push the potential consequences for animals to the back of their mind, which is sad, but yeah.
And
And
oftentimes
another interest.
sorry.
Sorry, no, you go.
I was just gonna say that oftentimes you have, much more possibility to reach far more people and influence more people to go vegan by being child free because you have more time to like the
Mm,
nonprofit that I worked for, we would go to colleges and talk to students and if I had kids, maybe I wouldn't have had time to do that. Um,
mm.
you see a lot of people in the movement who are making waves who are child free because they don't have, when you become a parent, that's your focus and it consumes so much
Mm.
of your life. And over the years, I've seen lots of passionate activists drop off once they have kids, because they don't have the time anymore.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think I don't want to say too much on this because I want to make a video on this, going through all my thoughts on why I think it's misguided for vegans to want to have kids. But one final thing I want to like touch on, that you brought up earlier, which is really interesting, is you said that like so many vegans, their parents aren't vegan. And I think that's interesting for two reasons. I think one, it just goes to show how influential education is, because they obviously didn't get veganism from their parents, so they absorbed it from some sort of education or information that was out there. So I think it goes to show that. I think the other thing that's interesting is that sometimes when I speak to vegans about whether they should have kids, they will say, um, "Oh, but I should have kids because I will be passing on a gene that will make them more likely to be vegan." And that one I find really interesting, and it hadn't fully clicked to me. But when you said that most vegans, their parents aren't vegan, well, if it was passed on through genetics, surely, like, once you become vegan and you try to convince your parents, if they've passed you on that gene that makes you more likely to be vegan, wouldn't they be so receptive to the message? But like, my if this gene exists, do I have it? Because I'm vegan. As soon as I heard the logic, I was convinced. So I seemed pretty low hanging fruit. So if anyone's going to have the gene, isn't it going to be me? But like, I spoke to my parents, and it's been 5 years, and neither of them are vegan. Do you get what I mean? So it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know if this vegan gene is out there. Maybe there is a gene out there that makes people more compassionate, but that seems like very shaky ground to create someone and impose life on them, and run the risk of them eventually not being vegan and killing loads of animals. Um, and
It's
I hadn't thought of it
interesting.
in that way before you said that.
Well, and I find that most people, especially a lot of activists that I know, some of the most passionate activists, they are nothing like their parents. I'm nothing personally like
Mm,
either of my parents. You
yeah.
know, the opposite of my biological father, to be honest. I would call him like anti-vegan. And then I have like two dads. My other dad, he grew up exploiting cows, like on his dad's
Mm.
farm. So I don't know. I think it's silly for people to.
I bet they both look at you and think, "Fuck, how did we create a vegan? What?"
Oh, yeah,
It's like
yeah, and my
shit.
biological father was a police officer and a lieutenant for many, many years, so my
Mm,
protests and stuff like that, I'm sure he just I don't talk to him, but, I'm sure he's
yeah.
heard and I'm sure he hates it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Um, yeah, so I wanted to ask, so we've been speaking mostly about like how we should be engaging with like vegans, and like we're both vegans, so we're kind of having like a internal conversation in the vegan community. Like, we're kind of like, how should we sort this out amongst ourselves, basically. Um, but what I want to ask about or talk about now is like looking outward, right? So um there's quite a well, no one's ever done a study on it, so I don't know how big it is, but it seems like there's quite a big overlap between antinatalists and vegans. It seems like, and maybe this is me living in a bubble again. So maybe it's just that most of the antinatalists I interact with are vegan. So I'm sure there's that as well. But it seems like there is a big overlap, and so you've got a lot of people who want to spread both messages. And so I wanted to ask your opinion on, do you think we should be mixing the messages of antinatalism, or should we be trying our best to keep them separate? Even though I agree they are linked, but
Mhm,
in the way we communicate them, should we keep them separate? And the reason I'm asking this is because if you're talking to people about veganism, some of the people that would be receptive may be deterred by antinatalism. And if you're talking to people about antinatalism, and would be receptive, maybe they get deterred by veganism. So if you keep them separate, it's like maybe you can widen your audience. Whereas if you keep them together, maybe less people are going to be receptive. What do you think about that?
I can totally understand that, and for me, I think so many things are intersectional, and I know there are people
Mm,
who are very anti-intersectionality, as Unnatural Vegan stated in her video, like, she doesn't think there should be overlaps and things. I, on the other hand, do, and again, I think it just comes down to the individual that you're speaking with. Oftentimes when doing Stop Having Kids, the conversation ends up veering toward veganism with non-vegans, And I have seen it kind of turn some people off, but I've also seen it get people to think a little deeper too. So it's really
Mm.
situational, I think.
Yeah, I honestly, like, even though I was the one that asked this question, I don't really have like a good answer. I think the same as you. It's really situational. You've got to judge it on the person. Maybe there are some like rules of thumb that you can use when you approach people generally, but I haven't come up with any. It kind of seems like you do just have to take it person to person, and maybe what you can do is sort of I mean, kind of any conversation you're going to have, it's going to start with one of them. Basically, it seems hard to conjure up a conversation in my mind where veganism and antinatalism come into the conversation at the exact same time. So one of them's going to come first. So maybe you sort of, if I'm talking to someone about veganism, and it's going well and they're very receptive, and I'm thinking, or maybe I could sort of push this a bit further, and maybe I could mention like antinatalism as well. Maybe sort of like drop very subtle hints of it and see if they sort of go for them, and if they don't, then just fucking stay on veganism and don't fuck it up.
Yeah.
um and if they seem to take the bait, then maybe go a bit further. But like, honestly, an idiot could have come up with that advice. So I've not really got any like really good advice to give people. It's kind of a hard one. I think yeah, we just each have to, as individuals, um, like take it as we find it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah, which can be hard, but um, and I want to, because we're coming up to an hour. I want to like round off, but one thing I wanted to ask you is, swinging back to stuff you do personally. I don't know fully, but are you a co-host on a podcast?
Yeah, yeah, it's called
Yeah.
Mintersectional. So a lot of intersections of veganism, feminism. We've talked antinatalism, although the person I do the podcast with, she wouldn't call herself antinatalist, but she understands a
Mm,
lot of, the common arguments and things like that.
mm. Yeah, so the reason I'm bringing it up is because I wanted to ask, like, obviously, at the end, I'll ask you, to say where people can find you and stuff, and I'll put all of the like links in the description. But are there any, and I'll put the link to the podcast in the description, but are there any specific like episodes or interviews or discussions you've done on that podcast which are relevant to this? Like, have you just spoken to your other co-host with about antinatalism like off air, or have you done stuff on air? How has that gone? That sort of stuff.
Yeah, we actually recently had my friend on who is an anarchist zine writer, and he recently made an antinatalist zine after like a couple conversations we had, and he's like, "Oh, would it be cool if I did this?" I said, "Absolutely," because people can look at refraining from procreation as being kind of radical and a
Mm,
way to express your anarchy. You're not bringing another consumer or whatever into existence. It's funny that that can be seen as a radical stance, but some see it that way. Um, Gosh, I want to say it was episode 18 or 19 that he was on. I can let you know for sure. But
yeah,
we
yeah.
did talk a bit more about antinatalism. And I think that people watching this would probably find that zine pretty interesting too. So I could send you the link to that as well. That's probably the episode we most talked about it. Um, I would like to have Deets on at some point to have a more thorough
Mm,
conversation on the podcast about antinatalism and stop having kids.
mm. And actually, I got another question off the back of that, about like your experience with intersectionality. Because obviously, with intersectionality, if you're having conversations with people who are sort of in intersectional spaces, you're going to be talking about a variety of topics, right, and how they interlink. Is is antinatalism even on the radar of a lot of intersectionals? Is it one of those topics that's thrown in the mix, or is it kind of seen as like, you know because so I don't know how best to put this. So like, a lot of intersectionals, not all of them, but some of the more toxic forms of like intersectional people, they can be very quick to jump on people and presume bad intentions when there aren't, and the word like racist or something gets thrown around. And does that happen with antinatalism at all? Is it one is because the way that I see it, and I'll stop rambling in a minute and I will let you answer the question. But the way I see it is that with intersectionality, antinatalism could go two ways. It could be that intersectionals are open to a variety of different topics and they want to include and talk about it. Or because intersectional people tend to be more sensitive to, um, how would you put it? Like, sensitive to different topics, maybe they see antinatalism as a threat. So, do you have any experience with how that's interacted?
I feel like it hasn't come up a ton as of yet, but it is entering the
Mm,
conversation a bit more now. Maybe that's just because, I've been doing this antinatalism outreach and stuff that I'm noticing it a little bit more. I just probably wasn't paying attention to it as much before.
mm,
Um, but yeah, I'm just kind of excited to see in the years to come in different spaces, um, if the topic of antinatalism does start coming up more as it becomes more like widely known. I know there was like a push or a petition out there to try to get it into the dictionary because it's not in the
yeah.
antinatalist is not in the dictionary. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's definitely more in the public eye and there's more awareness about it, but I still think we have a long way to go.
Mm. Yeah, honestly, I think maybe we should try and get it in the dictionary again because it's become so. When I say common, I don't mean like everyone knows about it, but it's become way more commonly used. Like articles have been written about it by mainstream people. Like a lot of people are aware. Like antinatalism was even spoken about. I saw. Um, and people have different opinions on the guy. Have you heard of Ryan Long, the comedian?
I don't think so.
He sort of became more like well known in the past couple of years. You've probably seen some of his stuff, but he's become more well known in the past couple of years. I don't really keep up with the guy. I don't really know what he does, but I know that he runs a podcast, and he's like probably one of the most like he seems like one of the most unphilosophical people ever. But even he did a bit speaking about antinatalism on his podcast, so it's
Wow.
becoming much more widely known. So I think like hopefully in the next few years at least it will get in the dictionary, hopefully anyway. Um but yeah, like I said before, if anyone wants to find you or like follow what you're doing or the podcast or anything else you're involved in, where can they find that? What projects are you involved in? All of that stuff.
So I'm most active probably on Instagram. It's Ash Wickety. I do a little bit on Twitter. Twitter's mostly kind of like my antinatalist space, I guess.
Mm,
Not super active on there. And yeah, just I organize for Stop Having Kids. I co-host the Intersectional podcast. And then I just kind of do random volunteering with different organizations and stuff. I for the vegans watching this, if you are not familiar with animal activism mentorship, definitely want to put a plug out for them. They have been organizing different convergences around the US, and I got to link up and stay in a house with like 20 other activists in Chicago a couple months ago. And it was cool because there were many antinatalists there as well. So we had some like
mm.
really interesting late night kitchen conversations introducing antinatalism to those who were new to the idea. Um,
The uninitiated.
yes. So that was a really like big highlight of that experience for me besides, protesting and stuff every day.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's kind of who I've been a little more active with recently in the animal rights space.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I'll include all those links in the description so people can find you and follow you. If there's any more that you think of that you haven't thought of now, like just send them to me and I can include them. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. It's been really nice to like talk about this with you. And yeah, thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.